Welcome, everyone, to Finds of Yesterday. I'm Lynn, and due to the requested interest in detailed information on vintage jewelry designers, we're going to continue doing episodes, and this episode happens to be about Schreiner Jewelry. So, we're going to discuss the history of Schreiner, some of the features, the construction, some of the marks they used, and then we're going to research and do some pricing on eBay. So Henry Schreiner was a blacksmith from Bavaria, Germany, who came to the U.S. in 1925. In 1932, that's when he started his jewelry business. He wanted to mimic high-end designer pieces by using inverted crystals, bold and colorful pieces, and large statement pieces, but at costume prices. The company was flourishing in the 1940s, and then his daughter, Terry, whose real name is Teresa, and her husband, Ambrose Albert, took over the company in the 1950s, and the company rose to new heights. Ambrose did play a major part in the creations of the jewelry. So during their 40 years in business, they created a legacy by their unusual color combinations, their handmade settings, and their custom-made stones. So they were in business from 1932 to 1975. So in the early days, which was the 1930s, Henry took over. He actually bought out a buckle company that he was working for. And some of his first pieces he produced were sterling, marcasites. Like you see here on the screen, the left side has a brooch with MS on it, which is he made for his wife, which was Matilda Schreiner. And then on the right is a pendant necklace with marcasites in it. They incorporated carnelian, lapis, chalcedony accents. And since the castings were made back then, they did not have prongs, so the stones were all glued in. They also produced jeweled and decorative buttons, and that was a big business for them, as well as belt buckles. A profound change that Henry made was using less metal to create lighter pieces than ones with castings. This way the pieces couldn't weigh down the lighter clothing fabrics. In the 1940s, imports were limited because of the war as well as travel. So the American designers had to use what they had and improvise. And that's when the styles changed, because before, the designers were inspired by the designers of Paris, where clothing items were custom made to each person. Now ready-to-wear clothing was made in all sizes. After the war, when people traveled back to Paris again, they brought back jewelry they liked, and it was an inspiration for the Schreiner pieces, although Schreiner did not copy pieces. Many people contribute the Schreiner designs to Henry, but a vast majority of designs were attributed to Ambrose. Many of his designs were large, measuring about 2 to 2.5 inches, but sometimes reaching 5 inches. And some of them had depths up to 1.5 inches. Some of these they called mile highs. Like the one on the right, you can see how it stands up. It has a dome shape. And his first design was the ruffle pin, which is on the left here. And he did that in 1957. Shadow boxes is also another design of Ambrose. In the mid 1960s, they experimented with lucite that they purchased in Europe, and it did not scratch. They called them baubles or eggs. It wasn't incorporated into Schreiner until about the mid 60s, even though lucite was invented by DuPont in the 30s. Schreiner did not use them until the 60s, but again, they got it from Europe. And then in the 1970s, it brought great change. The jewelry industry was changing. It was the hippie movement, and women were working, and they would wear layered chains. Plain metal pieces became popular, and Items crafted from like shell and wood, macrame, ethnic inspired beads. This decade was least focused on jewelry. In the 60s and 70s, they substituted resin for glass to brighten the pieces. But the styles changed so drastically, and Ambrose fell ill in 1974, so Terry made a difficult decision to close the business and retire. Fabulous high-end costume jewelry was sadly over in the 70s. They sold off their remaining inventory, and by 1975, production of Schreiner jewelry had ceased. So some of the features you'll see in Schreiner jewelry is inverted crystals, like you'll see on the picture on the left, keystones, quirky shaped stones, and we're going to go through some of these, and you'll see pictures of these, but I'm just going to summarize them. Recessed cabs, they use crimp cupcake settings, fancy dogtooth prongs, unfoiled stones, which had open backs, and a 5-hoop extension on necklaces. They use pendant hooks on brooches, hook and eye construction, side-facing stones, earrings with donut holes. So here's an example of keystones. That's stone on the left is the keystone shape, and you can see how they use it in some of their brooches. They use quirky shaped stones, and this is what made them stand out among all the other jewelry designers of the time. They used odd-shaped stones. They used inverted crystals, and this is probably one of their signature type stones, and not to be confused with Rivoli stones. These seem to have more facets on the bottom, or the top is what's showing. And recessed cabs, here's a good example of that. It meant that they layered their stones, so you can see the green is underneath the blue. It just gave the piece depth and excitement. It's such a gorgeous piece. They also use crimped cupcake settings, kind of like a pie crust. You'll see a good example of it here. And you can see their oval cartouche on the top. They also used fancy dogtooth prongs, like in the center picture. That's a very good example of, if you see these dogtooth prongs, think Schreiner. And you can see it on the left too, but not as clearly as the center picture. And on the right is the same necklace, just zoomed out. They also used 5-hoop extensions on their necklaces. You see the 5 rings? That is a signature of their necklaces. They do that on every one. Hook and eye is a little hard to see on here, but it's basically 2 loops looped together on the back. You'll see it. And it's not done on all their pieces. It's only done on some. But if you do see this, it's a pretty good chance it's Schreiner. And they used a lot of side-facing stones. And that's another good clue that it's a Schreiner piece. You can see how the piece actually stands up and gives it some height. And on their earring backs, they use these donut holes. Now you will find pieces with other types of backs, but this is a distinguishing factor of Schreiner. And they also use pendant hoops on the backs of their brooches. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the marks. The one thing about Schreiner is they only had about 3 designs, plus they didn't sign a lot of their pieces. So a majority of their pieces on the market today date between the 50s to the mid-70s. Pieces from the late 40s to early 50s were the half moon and occasionally marked Schreiner Jewelry, New York City, or NYC, on this semi-circular plaque. But most commonly, pieces are marked Schreiner, New York. So the center one is the most common one. And then occasionally they'd have it in Schreiner, in capital letters in the oval cartouche. But the thing about these pieces is they interchanged a lot throughout the years. They used the same designs throughout the years, just changed out colors and stones. So you're going to see a mix of these cartouches on the back, and it's going to be hard to date the piece. So it's a little bit complicated to identify the correct date for these designs since they were used multiple times. Let's go on to some specialty beads. They really do have some gorgeous pieces, and they are a little bit more rare, but I wanted to point out that there is a lot of variations of stones that they used. So number one, the blue one, has some long rectangular stones that have rounded edges. That's simply gorgeous piece. Then we have number two, which is an emerald cut platform stone. Number three is a Moroccan tile bead, as well as number five. And on the top left, them three are all Moroccan tile beads. Number four is a mosaic tile, the orange one. So if you see closely, there's little tiny flowers in there, and that's all tiny beads. And then also we have a Millefiori, which is on the top right. So they did produce some wonderful, wonderful pieces. The resource I used to give you this information was all from the Schreiner book by Carol Tannenbaum and Eve Townsend. And it is a great book, and it is so full of information that you would be excited reading it. The story is interesting, and it's a great book for resource. So thank you for joining me. We're going to carry on next to eBay and look at some of the pricing and see some of the pieces that have sold, so we know when we're out and about looking. All right, here we are in the eBay screen. As you can see on the top here, I put in Schreiner, and it pulled up all the Schreiner jewelry. I sorted from highest to lowest over here on the right side, and let's take a look and see what is available today. So we have the Schreiner ruffle brooch that we discussed, and here's the third one is the purple ruffle style brooch as well. It's more like a Maltese cross, and they're asking $8,000 and $6,000 for these, which is a little extreme, and I think they're just hoping they get a good offer on them, and they probably will take it. We have a gorgeous flower red brooch here on the right that has the dogtooth prongs on it. And we scroll down, we see a variety of different pieces. Let's see which one we can pick out. Ooh, look at the one on the far right. Look at that lucite piece. That is like crystal clear, and they call it a jelly belly. That is just a gorgeous domed piece, and they're asking $4,000 for it, which again I think is a little high. Let's scroll down. Here's some Maltese cross shaped ones, and these are all in the almost 4,000 range. Here's a pretty necklace on the right here, this purple one. Let's look at the links on it. See the 5 links? That is a perfect example of a Schreiner. Let's see if they show the back. Oh, this one is marked. This one does have quite a bit of wear, and the open backs. It has cup chain, and they're asking $3,500 for it. Here's a black ruffle brooch with the keystone stones in it. Look at this pretty yellow, bright yellow navettes or marquise, some people call them. Here's a nice domed one. That's a good example of Schreiner. There's a fringe necklace. Look at this pretty white satin glass. Pretty pink. Lots of pink ones, lots of round pink. Here's a white ruffle glass one. Look at the second one in gold here. This is a good example of the dog tooth prongs. They're asking $2,500 for that one. Oh, and it had, let's go back to that. On the back it has the cup chain, the cupcake chain, or cupcake setting. See how that's crimped, and it's got the open back on it, which is signature of Schreiner. That's definitely a Schreiner piece. This purple one is absolutely gorgeous. $2,500 for the set. And here's one that's like a faux turquoise. And some smoky rhinestones. I'm wondering, this one must be signed. Yeah, it does say signed. This one I don't believe is Schreiner. It almost looks like Miriam Haskell. Let's go to the solds on this. Alright, we got its highest to lowest over here, and the Schreiner minus the lots, because I'm trying to get the lots out of the picture here. So here we have the black ruffle keystone that's sold for less than $3,700. I believe this one sold for $2,565. You can look up the prices on Terapeak. You have a eBay store. This one is gorgeous too. It's pale yellow, moss green. And look at this big, beautiful yellow. It almost looks like a ruffle brooch. Has layers to it. Schreiner loved doing their layers. Look at this pretty cross. This Maltese cross. I looked this one up. It sold for $1,180. Let's look this one up. This is beautiful. Look at the light that can come through with them open stones and open backs. See how the side, it's got the side facing stones. It's got longer prongs on it. It's not the dog tooth prongs, but it does have longer prongs. Let's see if there's a picture of the back. Here we go. Wow, this one actually has the hook and eye setting, as you can see here. There's a better picture of it. Here's the hook and eye. And it's got the side-facing stones. So that one, let's see, that one sold for, I don't know, I think it was around $1,600, but I could be wrong. That's what it's listed for. Look at this beautiful one, turquoise. $1,445, had 30 bids on it. There's so much interest in Schreiner because there was not a whole lot of pieces made of each individual ones. A lot of them they made for individuals, and people could come in and pick out what they wanted and then they would go make it. This one is absolutely stunning. It's got iris glass in it. $952. Now I honestly would have thought that would have gone for more. Isn't that gorgeous? These, I believe, are Czech stones. See the back? It's all open back. This one is signed Schreiner. It's hard to tell. New York. $962 and 13 bids. You can see the interest for Schreiner. There's 805 results for solds. There's 931 listed and 805 sold. So you can see the sell-through rate on Schreiner is wonderful. It is definitely something you want to keep an eye out for. It is a little harder to find, but it is worth it if you do find it. I'm going to go to lowest first. Let's look at some of the lower price pieces. Now these are all on auction because there's so much interest in Schreiner pieces that everybody puts them on auction. All of these are on auction. There's really some good prices right now. This one's actually an etched stone. Only has one bid but 7 days left. Here's one at $30 for buy it now. Another $30. That's the minimum price. 26, 35. This one already has $41 and it's got 10 bids on it, but it still has 7 days left. So you can see, look at the dog tooth prongs on this one. This is a real good example, and this blue one too. Gorgeous. But you can see that Schreiner didn't always use the dog tooth prongs. Like this purple flower has just little individual, like 4 prongs on the stone. And how unique these pieces are. There's nothing that's been duplicated by other companies. They're all very unique. The dogtooth prongs actually give it an accent, like another feature to look at. So now we're up to $100 and I haven't even scrolled that far. Here's a white milk glass. That one's really pretty. So you can see how it would be worthwhile picking up a Schreiner piece if you run across it, or now you know what to look for when you are scrolling through a feed of brooches that you might want to buy, or if you're out at the thrift store, you'll know what to look for. And hopefully this helped. And if you have any questions about Schreiner, please leave it in the comments. If I don't know the answer, I will definitely research it and look it up and find you an answer. If there's anything else you want to see, what other types of jewelry companies you want to learn about, please leave that in the comments. Let me know what your favorite Schreiner style is, what your favorite piece might be. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you on the next one.